The crucifixion. Almost everywhere, the Romans crucified the condemned naked, but not in Judea, because the Jews strongly objected to the public display of the naked human body. As a result, they had persuaded the Romans to allow the victim to be wrapped in a loincloth during all crucifixions in Judea. Upon arriving at Golgotha, after his clothes were taken from him, Jesus was given such a cloth. Then the terrible moment came when the soldiers tied his arms to the crossbeam with a rope, and then nailed him to it with thick nails driven through his palms. Then, with combined strength, they lifted Jesus, with the crossbeam, up along the standing beam and secured it, forming a cross. His legs were then tied to the standing beam, and with one long thick nail, his feet were pierced, nailing his body to the cross. The standing beam had a large peg at the level of the seat, serving as a sort of saddle to support the body's weight. The cross was not high. The master's feet were about 1 meter above the ground. He could hear everything the onlookers said in mockery of him, and he could clearly see the facial expressions of all those who ridiculed him. Crucifixion was a cruel, prolonged execution. The wounds in the hands and feet were not fatal, so the victim often died only after several days from fever or dehydration. Most of the inhabitants of Jerusalem were strongly opposed to crucifixions, and there was a society of Jewish women who always sent a representative to a crucifixion to offer the victim wine mixed with a sedative to ease his suffering. But when Jesus tasted the sedative wine, he refused to drink it, despite how thirsty he was. The master chose to keep his human consciousness sharp until the very last moment. He wished to face death, even in this cruel and inhuman form, and to overcome it by submitting to the full human experience of dying. Before Jesus was nailed to the cross, the two thieves had already been hung on their crosses, desperately struggling and continually cursing and spitting at their executioners. However, when Jesus was nailed to the crossbeam, he allowed it willingly, and his only words were, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." Jesus could not have made such a loving intercession for his executioners from his human nature alone, if he had not lived his entire life with this deep conviction, and always focused his thoughts on loving devotion and unselfish service to his fellow human beings. True character is openly revealed in a crisis. When the Master was lifted up on the cross, the captain nailed the inscription above his head, which read in 3 languages, "Jesus of Nazareth, the King of the Jews." The Jews were furious about this supposed insult. However, Pilate was also annoyed by their improper threats. He felt intimidated and humiliated, and in this petty way he took revenge. He could have written, "Jesus, a rebel," but he deliberately chose these words because he knew very well that the Jews in Judea despised even the name of Nazareth, and he was determined to get back at them in this way. The Apostle John, his mother Mary, his youngest sister Ruth, and his brother Judas arrived at Golgotha shortly after Jesus was lifted up, while the captain was still nailing the inscription above the cross. When Jesus saw his mother, with beside her his faithful apostle John, and also his brother Judas and his youngest sister Ruth, he smiled with emotion, but he said nothing. Meanwhile, the 4 soldiers assigned to carry out the crucifixion were dividing his clothes among themselves. One took the sandals, one the headcloth, one the belt, and the 4th took the cloak. The tunic, the seamless garment that reached just above the knees, was left, and when the soldiers saw what a beautiful, unique piece of clothing it was, they decided to cast lots for it. Jesus looked down at them as they divided his garments. Jesus did not mind this. He wanted his followers to have nothing material associated with his life on earth. He wanted to leave humanity only the memory of a human life dedicated to the high spiritual ideal of doing the will of the Heavenly Father.